So I would say we go ahead. Some people have said they are not able to join, but they want to see the recording. So we are already recording this session. A warm welcome to all the participants who were able to join. My name is Eva Can, and I'm the leader of the WIN for Peace group of expertise of Women in Nuclear Global. Today we have the big pleasure of welcoming Ms. Rhonda Evans from the World Institute for Nuclear Security to this webinar. Some of our members wanted to learn more about nuclear security, in particular cybersecurity. And I strongly believe in the practical application of the 3 S's, which is safety, security, and safeguards. So we are all integrating our skills into a common objective to ensure the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. So this topic very well fits into our mission. And before I introduce Rhonda and hand over to her, let me give you a brief overview of who is Women in Nuclear, the WIN for Peace group, and what we do. So let me switch to my screen. And I hope you can all see it. Okay, there was a way to, excuse me, Agostina, do you know how I can disable the right screen? Okay.
No, Eva, you should put like full screen somehow.
Put full screen. Okay, I cannot see that. I'm afraid it doesn't matter. Let me just start. So we have about 20 members in the WIN for Peace group of expertise, which was founded more than a year ago. Our objective is to bring more women into the areas of nuclear non-proliferation, safeguards, export controls, and disarmament, because I strongly believe that by having more women to work on these issues, this will contribute towards world peace. We have coordinated activities across all 4 domains. In particular, we have education and training sessions, most of them in the form of webinars like this one, but also hybrid events, for example, at the WIN Global conferences. I am the leader of this group, and membership is open to all WIN Global members. Currently, we have 25 members from 4 continents, and here you see their photos. So welcome again, and to all of you and to all those beyond. And we also have 2 supporters. One is the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation, the VCDNP, which many of you will know. And the other one is the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs in Vienna, the UNODA. In 2023, we held a total of 7 webinars, and I'm not going to read the titles of them all, related to our subject areas. We had 555 registered participants and 358 unique viewers from all continents. And you will find the recordings of our webinars on our WIN Global YouTube channel. Just Google in YouTube WIN Global, Women in Nuclear Global, and they will pop up. We announce our webinars on social media like Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and also if you have joined us before, you will be on our email list, and our webinars are open to anyone who is interested. Let me just give you an overview of the 7 webinars we have so far conducted and what we are still planning for this year. So we started off in February with Bob Kelly, who spoke to us about the basics of nuclear weapons. Then we had Jeremy Whitlock and Adjoa Amponfi. Adjoa is one of our young members who talked to us about how to safeguard SMRs. Last month, I spoke about the basics of the nuclear fuel cycle. Today, we have Rhonda here to speak about nuclear security, in particular cybersecurity. Next month, we will have Nusa Ben Rais, who is a professor of nuclear physics, to talk about the basics of nuclear physics. In July, the date, I think it will be the 12th of July, we will have some of our Win for Peace members to speak about the Treaty of Pelindaba. Sorry, I forgot to update this. It will only be about the Pelindaba Treaty and AFCON, and what AFCON does, and how women contributed towards the coming into force of the Pelindaba Treaty. In August, we will have Susie Snyder from ICAN to talk about the TPNW, the Treaty on the Proliferation of on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. In September, we will have Ms. Deepti Chubi from the CTBT to speak about the status of the CTBTO and their IMS system, etc. In October, sometimes we will have the second part of the nuclear weapons-free zones, probably ARCA on the Treaty of Tlatelolco and Bangkok. And in November, during the WIN Global Conference, we plan to touch upon some women-specific topics. Okay, so this is an overview of what is Win for Peace. And now it's my great honor and pleasure to welcome Rhonda Evans from the World Institute for Nuclear Security. Let me first give you a brief her bio, who she is and what she does. So Rhonda is the head of program development and implementation at the World Institute for Nuclear Security, or WINS, as many of you may know it, which is an international non-governmental organization, and it's located in Vienna. So Rhonda is responsible for designing, developing, and implementing programs that support capacity building in nuclear security globally. A large part of that work is to support the core value of WINS, which is the gender equality, diversity, and inclusion by design in all of WINS programs. Rhonda has had a long career at the national and international level in nuclear safety and security. By training, she's a lawyer, and she spent 25 years in regulatory bodies in Australia, including as the General Legal Counsel and then Deputy Chief Executive and Head of Regulation at the Australian Nuclear Safety and Radiation Protection Agency, ARPANSA. She was also at the IAEA for 5 years at the IAEA Division of Nuclear Security as a Senior Nuclear Security Officer, and she joined WINS in 2017. So Rhonda and I first met on a plane on the way to Morocco in December of 2019, when we were both invited to join the opening of WIN Africa, and our plane got diverted and we were in the same bus. So that was a pleasure to meet Rhonda in that event. And we had the request by one of our members for somebody to talk about nuclear security, and I couldn't think of anybody better than Rhonda to talk to us. And anyway, Rhonda, I hand over to you, and you will give us an overview of what you will talk about and how you will handle the webinar. Thank you very much. So welcome, Rhonda, and thank you for making your time available.
Thank you so much, Eva. It's amazing the conversations you can have on a bus. But what Eva didn't mention was that the plane attempted to land, I think, 2 or 3 times before the pilot decided that he was aborting that particular attempt and landing at a different airport. So there's always something exciting in the world of women in nuclear. And I think we have nerves of steel. What I was saying to Eva and Augustina before we started the webinar is, this is the kind of topic where you might be sitting there and you think, I'm not sure. I think I really want to ask a question right now, because that was certainly my introduction to cybersecurity. And I'll talk about some of the great experts in cybersecurity that I've worked with over time. So please, I know we can't really see each other, but the wonderful thing about virtual platforms is we have the raise hand feature. And so I honestly am saying, if at any point there's anything that I'm talking about that you would like some more information about, feel free to raise your hand. We can figure out when is the best time to address the question. But honestly, although it feels a little strange because I'm here on my computer and you're there on yours, as far as I'm concerned, this is a conversation. So I'm going to share my screen. And that should work very well because I have a wonderful young man in my office who always makes sure that I know exactly what I'm doing. And it says I am now screen sharing. So I wanted to call this Nuclear Cybersecurity and Gender. And when we get into this whole presentation, you will understand why gender is such an important aspect when we talk about cybersecurity. Now, irritatingly, I think you can probably see some of the things that are popping up and down on my computer, but anyway, let's ignore those. So, yes, I have been working for a long time, since 1989, in fact. But I joined the world of nuclear safety and nuclear security in the year 2000, when I became the General Legal Counsel for the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Agency. And prior to that, I'd actually worked in broadcasting regulation. And one of the main continuities, if you like, between those two roles is the fact that I have spent my entire career working with engineers of all different flavors. In broadcasting, they were broadcasting engineers, telecommunications engineers, electrical engineers, and somehow this has been a theme in my life because, of course, by the time you get to cybersecurity, it is also very dominated by engineers. So I owe a great debt in terms of my understanding to the engineers that I have worked with over many years. So I spent quite a long time in regulatory bodies. And one of the things that I was discussing with Eva before we started was that many of the big changes in nuclear security came about as a result of the horrific terrorist attacks in the United States that occurred in September of 2001. And during that time, I was actually providing legal advice on a very significant licensing decision from a regulatory point of view, and that was the construction of the Opal research reactor in Sydney. It's a reactor we are very proud of. Any of you who are on this call from Argentina will know that it is a fantastic example of Argentine design. And in fact, over the years, I have worked very frequently with Argentinian experts because the Opal reactor in Sydney was in fact designed by INVAP. But when 9/11 occurred, I was providing advice on a main licensing decision. And of course, at the time, the predominant concern was that licensing decisions on nuclear reactors would be made with the full understanding and awareness of the general public. And that meant that every single document that had been lodged with the regulatory body was in fact in the public domain. Every design detail, every feature of the engineering, we had a preliminary safety analysis report, we had to a very large extent the entire design of the reactor, the fuel type, which was low enriched fuel, also the type of the targets that would be used to make molybdenum, they were also low enriched uranium targets. Every detail of everything was in the public domain. So overnight, we had to understand what that meant. Now, the interesting thing for the purposes of our discussion about cybersecurity, which we will be getting into, is that it was still at a time when most things were provided in hard copy. It wasn't that everyone in the world accessed the internet, and it certainly was not the case that everyone in the world had a mobile phone. So very, very different times. And in some ways, that was probably a relief, perhaps less burdensome for the security services, because we were operating in a time when information was not instantaneously able to be retrieved or spread. So in some ways, more innocent times for nuclear security and indeed cybersecurity. In the next 12 years, that changed significantly. I mean, I went to work at the IAEA Division of Nuclear Security in 2012. 11 years had passed between 2001, when the terrorist attacks in 9/11 happened, and 2012. And in that time, the explosion in international instruments, in international initiatives, in an awareness of nuclear security, and indeed, over time, cybersecurity, had really fundamentally changed the landscape that we were in. So during that time, I also became aware of something called cybersecurity. And that actually started in 2001 when I was General Legal Counsel. And I had to be read into National Threat Assessment, which related to the new reactor that was being built in Australia's largest city, Sydney, very close to main population centres. And there was an increasing concern about cyber attacks. Interestingly, in 2001, it wasn't really a concern about non-state actors undertaking cyber attacks. It was, in fact, state actors that were the biggest concern for most security services at the time. So this gives you some idea about what was going on in those decades in relation to nuclear security, broadly with the events of 9/11, and this was all around the actions of non-state actors, terrorists and criminals who wished to do harm through either stealing material, radioactive material, whether it was nuclear or other types of radioactive material, like high activity sources, or indeed sabotage of facilities or material in transport. So there suddenly was a very big shift in our understanding. ARPANSA was principally a radiation protection and nuclear safety agency. So suddenly and overnight, we had to become expert in nuclear security. So as I mentioned, I joined the IAEA in 2012. It was then the Office of Nuclear Security, not the Division of Nuclear Security. And any of you who know the very energetic and wonderful man, Kamal Marabat, from Morocco, may well know that he was the person who, after Anita Nielsen started the Office of Nuclear Security, then made sure that it became a division and it had the resources and the staff in order to go forward and create even more documents and even more services to assist all of our colleagues around the world become more expert in nuclear security. And I am also a member of the IAEA chapter of Women in Nuclear. I thank them for not kicking me out after I left the IAEA, but I think that those of us who live in Vienna kind of get to still hang out with the IAEA chapter of Women in Nuclear and the incredible leadership of the women there. It's not a great picture in nuclear security in terms of gender equality, in terms of diversity, and in terms of inclusion. One of the things that really shocked me as, I guess, a youngish woman in my 30s when I first joined the nuclear regulator was just how male-dominated nuclear was. So very early on, I got on the aeroplane from Australia and I flew to Vienna probably 6 times a year. I went to OECD NEA meetings in Paris probably 3 times a year. I was on various committees related to nuclear safety and nuclear regulation, and very often I was the only woman. I was certainly the only person, in addition, under the age of about 55. So I felt pretty much like a fish out of water on both counts, my youth and my gender. And to be perfectly honest, this year will be my 24th IAEA General Conference, and I haven't missed one in the last 24 years. The pleasing thing is that there are significantly more women involved at the IAEA General Conference, but still not so many involved in nuclear security. And in fact, nuclear security is a bit of a global or broad description of the discipline. And within the discipline, there are sub-disciplines where there are even fewer women involved, which I think is extremely problematic and something that I personally am spending a lot of my career working to change. So let's have a look at cybersecurity. In fact, as you'll see in the second dot point, although we sometimes talk about less than 20% women in nuclear security, cybersecurity is probably less than 5%. And I'm talking about cybersecurity as practiced in the nuclear industry. It might be a little bit more in the banking industry and financial sectors, but I don't think so. Having spent time looking at those other industries as well. There are very, very few women in transport security, which also has a lot of elements of cybersecurity in the way in which transport security is now managed. And there are also very few women in guarding and traditional response force roles, probably less than 10%. The image of the woman here, she is an armed response officer from the UK Civil Nuclear Constabulary. They are one of our great partners in raising awareness of roles that are available for women in armed guarding, escort and response services, but still they struggle, and they struggle a great deal to increase the number of women in that sector. And it's very simple. The stereotypes about who is a nuclear security professional, who is an armed guard, who is a cybersecurity expert, the stereotype is that they are men. And there continues to be bias and discrimination which impedes the recruitment of women, the retention of women, and the promotion of women in these key areas of nuclear security. So, what to do about that? Well, when I joined WINS in 2017, I realised that WINS was doing nothing in the area of gender equality, diversity and inclusion. And I'd come from the IAEA where there was some very credible efforts going on to increase the number of women in the professional levels of the IAEA. When I left the Division of Nuclear Security, I had been the only female P5 in the Division of Nuclear Security. There was another woman, Karen Burmeister, who some of you may know from Women in Nuclear. She was a German cost-free expert. The two of us were the only women at that level in the Division of Nuclear Security. And when we both left in 2017, there were none. There were no female P5s in the Division of Nuclear Security at all. That has now pleasingly changed, but for a very long time, there were no women above the level of P4. Now, for those of you who don't work in the IAEA, that really means there were no women in senior management positions within the division. There is, once more, a female director of the Division of Nuclear Security, but it is still an area where we are incredibly underrepresented. So WINS is doing a lot of work on trying to understand the main barriers to greater participation of women in this area. And that includes cybersecurity as well, which I'll get onto in a bit more detail. One of the things that we're very conscious of is people won't be persuaded unless you present evidence to them. evidence of the absence of women, but also evidence of the reason why it's an important issue to address. You would be surprised at how many people don't really think it's an important issue to address, or it's just about numbers. So what we're doing in our program is we are offering solutions, and we are advocating all of the time for greater understanding and awareness. An example I've got here with me is in 2023, myself and two colleagues wrote a paper for a cybersecurity conference. And the paper was Greater Diversity Within Cybersecurity and Its Workforce, and how this greater diversity enhances cybersecurity risk reduction. Because here's a tip. If you talk about gender equality, diversity, and inclusion on its own, and you don't relate it to what impact it will have on the sector in a positive manner, people don't listen to you. They just think it's purely an issue of you being a bleeding heart and you wanting more women in the sector, without them thinking about why that is important. I had a look at the Global Cybersecurity Outlook in 2023, which is a document written by the World Economic Forum. And there were some very interesting things that I drew out of that in framing this paper about why we needed more diversity in cybersecurity. And the first thing was 91% of respondents to these survey instruments put out by the World Economic Forum thought that there was going to be a catastrophic cyber event with worldwide implications in the next 2 years. So this was in 2023. So essentially, the respondents to the survey, well, probably they were surveyed in 2022, believed there would be a catastrophic cyber event. They also believed that a major contributor to a lack of cybersecurity resilience were all the different supply chains that operate around the world, and the difficulty contractually to get people to implement good cybersecurity. The other thing was most organizations are undertaking digital transformations. They are more and more dependent on digitalization, digital technology, ergo, they have greater vulnerability to a cybersecurity attack. The other finding was that leaders of organizations find it really difficult to understand the implication of new technology and to really manage this increased risk of a cyber attack. But then guess what? Cyber talent recruitment and retention was identified as a major issue for cybersecurity resilience. They don't have enough cybersecurity professionals. So when you add all that together, a fear of a major cybersecurity attack, an increase in vulnerability through supply chain issues, an abundance of digitalization of systems, a lack of leadership in the area, and a lack of a diverse workforce to meet these challenges, you kind of feel like you're facing a problem that has a fairly obvious solution. And that is recognizing that the lack of diversity, the lack of inclusion, the lack of more people entering into these very significant areas of security, including cybersecurity, is a major issue for us in terms of managing these risks and building in more resilience to the cybersecurity picture. So WINS never stops publishing on this issue. We continue to believe that at the organizational level, there are clear strategies that must be put into place to attract a more diverse workforce. It's quite simple. Without that diversity, we run the risk of, yes, a major cybersecurity incident, a lack of resilience, and a lack of an appreciation of simply how this would be managed. So at this point, I was going to pause. I will share again in a minute, but I just wondered if at this point there were any questions that anyone wanted to ask. So I'll just wait a second. If there aren't, I'll go back to the presentation. I'll just wait a minute.
I encourage all of you to seize this opportunity that we have Rhonda, who is really an important expert in this field, and that you ask her any question that you may have. And if you are too shy to talk up, please put your question also.
Put it in the chat, yeah.
But don't be shy, because Rhonda, she's really nice and she doesn't bite. So
I don't bite.
You don't bite.
Okay. All right, what I'll do, I'll get back to the presentation, and now I am going to dive into cybersecurity. And again, nothing to be scared of. I am not an engineer, I'm a lawyer. It's a logical system. I'm sure all of you are perfectly capable of getting deeply into this very logical system, and it's fun. Okay, I'll get back to sharing. All right, here we are. Okay, so now we are going to dive right in. So what is cybersecurity? Well, like many things in our world, it has a definition. And that definition is actually quite easy to unpack. It is about protecting information that's held in an IT system, so an information technology system, or an operational technology system. And we will actually look at what both of those things are. But what are we actually protecting the information in which respects? Okay, so we protect information. Why do we protect it? And in what regards do we protect it? Well, there are three things that we want to protect. Confidentiality. Only people who should be able to see the information can access it. That's what confidentiality means. So cybersecurity is the protection of information on systems to keep it confidential. Integrity. The information has not been altered by an adversary. That the information that is contained in the system has integrity, i.e., it has not been changed. Availability. If I need the information, I can retrieve it. It is available to me when I need it. And we'll be looking at a couple of different types of cyber attacks which fundamentally seek to alter the conditions of those three things: the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of the information that is stored in systems, IT systems and OT systems. So let's have a look at what an example of this is. So Bob wants to send Alice a private message, but Eve has malicious intentions. So if Bob sends Alice the message and Eve intercepts and reads it, Eve has breached the confidentiality of that information. It was never intended for her. She's read it. She has breached their confidentiality. In the next situation, Bob has sent something that he thinks is to Alice, but Eve has redirected it and changed the information, which is a breach of integrity. The information has been changed by Eve. And the third one is Bob attempted to send the email to Alice, but Eve intercepted it and it never ever reached Alice. So that's a breach of availability. So these are the three things that we are trying to ensure our information is protected against when it's in a system, either an IT system or an OT system. So hold that in your minds. Now, one of the really important ideas in security is the idea of a vulnerability that is exploited, okay? So if I am someone who is an adversary, who wishes to do harm, I will be looking for a weakness in your system. Once I find that weakness, I want to take advantage of that weakness, and that is called an exploit, or to exploit that vulnerability in the system. And the classical way to do that is through a piece of malicious software. Now, many of us have heard the term malware, and that simply is a shortening of malicious software. So malware is something which is actually intended to do something that is not authorized in the system. So the classic thing is malware is designed for an unauthorized process. Now, a well-known thing, a well-known example is a virus, okay, or a worm. And then there are other more sophisticated software that might target a system. So malware can come in lots of different forms. So a cyber threat. Now, a threat is a person or a group of people with the intention, the motivation, and the capability to cause harm. That is the meaning of cyber threat. Now, a cyber threat can initiate a threat event, which is a cyber attack, by putting malware into a system which exploits that weakness and may have an adverse impact on the system's function from either the availability of the information, the integrity of the information, or a breach of confidentiality in relation to that information. So this is what cybersecurity is all about. Now, there are some very common types of cyber attack. I always like to tease my cybersecurity friends about all the different words and terms that they come up with. So here are some common cyber attack types. And in the question and answer, maybe later on we can find out which ones of these people have actually heard about. So one is called a watering hole attack. Now, a legitimate website like the WINS website would be compromised with malware. And that means everyone who visited the WINS website could be targeted. Our WINS members could be targeted by this malware, okay? Then here's one that has actually been used against very large institutions. It's called a denial of service attack. So the attack is designed to prevent your clients, your customers, using services or functions or being able to access their data. Think about if this happened at your bank. Most of us do online banking. So a denial of service attack could mean that Bank Austria or the Bank of England or any other bank could be attacked such that I can't actually obtain services. And a distributed denial of service attack occurs when multiple computers are used in the attack. And that's called a botnet. I don't really know much about botnets, but this means there are a set of hijacked devices, typically computers, and that can have lots of different consequences when this is used to attack, because some of those things could include smart devices. There are lots of devices in our home that are essentially little computers that could be compromised. So I hope I'm not depressing you too much, but these are the things that you need to be aware of. They're the different types of malware. So remember, this is malicious software, is a virus. A virus attaches itself to another program. So when your children decide to use those free streaming services and they're downloading all kinds of stuff, chances are you may well end up with a virus on your computer from the lovely services that are trying to help them stream movies or other things that they otherwise shouldn't have on their computer. A Trojan horse as in the myth, of what I think it was the Greeks, wasn't it, who hid themselves inside the Trojan horse. It is malware that appears to be useless or harmless, but has a malicious function hidden inside it. A worm is a complete computer program. It can spread to all computers in a network system and execute a malicious action once it's inside. Ransomware is particularly nasty, and I know that the UK National Health Service was actually hit by a ransomware attack, which essentially means everything and all of your systems are disabled by this ransomware until you pay these terrible people money. And then the final one that we're looking at here is spoofing, which is a malicious program that appears to be legitimate, like a bank, but actually falsifies data and delivers it to another device. It's in the toolkit of people who want to steal money from trusting individuals who think that the website looks legitimate. Now, here is the reason why organizations get very excited about your social media presence and what you do on it. If you're all sitting in a room, I would ask you all to put your hands up if you are on LinkedIn, because this is something that you need to be aware of, because a platform like LinkedIn is prime target for social engineering and malware delivery. So there are lots of ways in which you can be manipulated into doing things that are contrary to good security practices. Another classic example is when you click on a link that has been sent to you by email, or you get one of those messages on your mobile phone which appears to be from DHL or one of those other providers, and it says, "You owe us money. Your parcel won't be delivered until you click on this link." Never, never, never do any of those things. It is social engineering malware delivery, okay? And you should always, always be aware of it. And it's what your cybersecurity people call good cyber hygiene. And this is why we need to have good cyber hygiene, because this, I talked before about IT systems and OT systems. This is IT systems. All of us every day for a very long time have engaged with IT systems at work. They're computer systems, software, networks, and technology, and they have all of these different aspects to them, some of which are designed to keep us safe, like firewalls. All of these things are something that we need to be aware of every time we step foot into a home office or our actual office. These are information technology systems, and they can be the targets of malicious actors who want to interfere with the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information stored in this system. Now, here's the really cool and interesting part about cybersecurity in its application to the nuclear industry. Now, I'm sure on this call, there are nuclear engineers who have far greater understanding of operational technology systems in reactors than I do. So you'll know very well that operational technology systems are fundamental to nuclear facilities, and they are responsible for many the monitoring and surveillance of many different physical processes, like valves and like pumps. And they contain digital assets. They have sensors, controllers, actuators, and human-machine interfaces, which is a fancy word for saying there's someone who sits in front of a monitor and makes decisions based on what that monitor is telling them about water levels, about the position of valves, and all the kinds of really important things for the safe functioning of a reactor. So, sensors detect or measure a physical property, so water level, and they provide a digital signal. A controller processes the input signals and then delivers an output. So that'll tell you what's going on. An actuator is responsible for moving or controlling a mechanism or system after a signal is received. And then the human-machine interface, I love this, is the user interface or dashboard that the person sits in front and reads what the screen is telling them. So in a physical process, a sensor will generate a signal based on what it is actually sensing. So here, in the tank level, it will tell us how much water is in that tank. Now, imagine if you are not being sent correct information about some very important indicators in a system. Imagine if the level, the flow, and the valve position is being reported incorrectly to you, and you're looking at it in your HMI interface, and you have expectations around decisions that you will make based on this information. Now, if a cyber threat actor interfered with the operation of this system by undertaking a cyber attack, the consequences could be significant because you are making decisions based on false information. So in terms of OT systems, operational technology systems, they typically then fall within, or actually the category that falls within there are industrial control systems. They are operational technology systems. And there are a number of specialized industrial control systems which are particular to, for instance, the nuclear industry for facilities. So an example of a specialized industrial control system is something called a supervisory control and data acquisition. And it might actually be how you manage electrical power transmission and distribution systems. So any electrical engineers on this call, you'll know exactly what a supervisory control and data acquisition system is. And then there are distributed control systems, which is something that might actually control a manufacturing process. And those of you who are involved in the nuclear industry will know that there are lots of instrumentation and control systems typically used in safety systems at a nuclear facility. These are all operational technology systems. These are all vulnerable to cyber attack. So here's just some more examples of industrial control systems, which are important for us to understand and know what they do. So, an instrumentation and control system in the context of a nuclear facility provides what we call sensing capabilities. It measures things and it provides surveillance of things to support people understanding how to monitor and control what's going on within your nuclear facility. So you can make decisions about it. So you can ensure that it is still operating safely within the parameters of the safety case. It very often provides automatic controls and it is designed to respond to system failure or abnormal events. This is in ordinary functioning. So you don't want a cyber threat to initiate a cyber attack to make it seem as if there is something going on where there is not, or to interfere with the ability to manage abnormal situations. And I love this. It's a very cool graphic. It was not made by me, but it shows you all the things that are going on, and it shows you fundamentally all the important aspects of operational technology in a nuclear power plant. So we have the control elements, we have smart sensors, and increasingly the world is full of smart sensors. Digitization is where we're at. And the human-machine interface means that a human being who still has to make decisions is fundamentally reliant on the information contained in these systems. We want to know that it has integrity and that it's available when we need it and it hasn't been compromised in any way. Now, the very interesting thing, and as I said, I am not a cybersecurity expert, I'm a lawyer, but the very interesting thing is that you don't necessarily protect information technology systems and operational technology systems in the same way. And the interesting thing that I learned from my cybersecurity expert friends is that you need to understand the different protection methods that might pertain to an information technology system as distinct from an operational technology system. And there's some very obvious reasons for that, and that is you probably want to interfere less with an operational technology system. And my friend, great friend and great cybersecurity expert, Donald Dudenhofer, who worked at the IAEA for a long time, gave me a very simple example. He said, in an IT system, there might be something that the software provider becomes aware of, and you have to patch the system, right? But if it's an operational technology system, and you don't actually know the consequences of patching the software in that system, you might not immediately do it straight away, because you don't want to actually interfere with the function of the system in the same manner that you could quickly fix something on an IT system. Now, I may not be explaining it so terribly well and as well as he does, but what you can see here is that there are different ways in which you would deal with, for here, patch management for an IT system, he says here, and this comes from his training course. Patch management can occur on a regular basis. It's a well-established practice. But for an operational technology system, patch management would have to be coordinated with the facility's operating schedule. And then you would also need to make sure it doesn't have the unintended consequences of affecting either a licensing parameter or a warranty on the operational technology system. So as you can see, there's some fairly important things you would need to think about before you could undertake patch management. So here's just an example of why it's so important when you're thinking about cybersecurity in this area, that there are different considerations for your information technology and operational technology systems. Now, what are some examples of operational technology systems at a nuclear facility? Well, as we saw from the example of the tank monitor, very often operational technology systems are fundamentally connected to your surveillance and monitoring of nuclear safety and safety-related systems. And there's a few examples here: safety injection system, auxiliary feed water system, safety depressurization and venting systems, for instance. These are all examples of operational technology systems. Now, in my field, there are physical protection systems to ensure the security and protection of both material and vital areas of a facility from unauthorized access and from adversaries who wish to sabotage the facility or steal the material. So there's a whole lot of operational technology systems that support the physical protection system, whether it's video surveillance, intrusion detection, access control, vehicle barriers, communication systems. They are all underpinned by operational technology systems, which have all of the various vulnerabilities that we have identified from someone who is determined to interfere with the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of the information on those systems. In addition, there are emergency preparedness systems that we're also very aware of, fire suppression systems rather, emergency management systems, monitors, and alarms. They're all OT systems, and they must also be protected. So that was a gallop through some introductory concepts of cybersecurity. So it's protection of information in digital systems. We want information to be kept confidential. We don't want it to be changed. We want it to be available. These digital systems must be protected and secured. We need to understand them, and they include both IT and OT. And whilst protection of information on IT and OT systems from cyber attacks has the same objective, we've also seen that there are different strategies in place because of the different characteristics that they have. But here's the most important message of this discussion. There are too few women working in this fundamentally important area. And we need to address that because the risks of successful cyber attacks are increasing. The ingenuity of our adversaries are increasing. And in order for us to reduce the risks to acceptable levels, we need to have a more diverse workforce. And fundamentally, we need to attract more women to this very, very important sector. That won't happen overnight, but it will require organizations to really, really change the way that they recruit, retain, and promote women, and particularly how they attract women to these areas where there are so few of us actually operating. So, you know, there's quite a lot to do. There are many challenges that we need to overcome. Oh, I forgot something really important. Sorry, I'm going to go back to my presentation or I will be shot by my colleagues. Haha, I forgot the most important point. Haha. So here's the most important point. WINS offers women a chance to undertake a certification program in cybersecurity essentials. We have scholarships for women, period. Doesn't matter which country you come from. You are eligible to apply for a WINS Academy scholarship in cybersecurity. The slides that I showed you come from a training course that is associated with our cybersecurity module. Our learning program is a self-paced learning program, which will take you 40 to 60 hours to complete in your own time, at your own pace, with all of the material that you need in order to deepen your understanding of cybersecurity. You sit an externally proctored exam. Pearson VUE is one of the largest test providers in the world. It's very rigorous, the exam. You can do it through virtual proctoring, i.e. there really is someone sitting on the other side of the camera making sure that you don't have the answers written up your arms and you don't have a book with the answers in it sitting in your room, or you can do the exam in person. Once you complete the exam and pass with a 65% pass rate, you get a digital badge which has metadata in it, which says you are certified in this area of cybersecurity, and this is the basis of your knowledge, which is, I think, a very important thing, particularly for your employer, to be assured that you've actually done a course which is fully accredited. So, yes, you will get a very balanced appreciation of cybersecurity risks for IT and OT systems in the nuclear context. And many of our alumni, as we call them from the course, have gone on to expand their career opportunities, and the feedback that we get. And if you go into the WINS website, I can paste it into the chat too, but you will be connected to the pages where you can find out about the WINS Academy, how you can apply to do this course, which will result in full accreditation for the training and the learning, how you can actually get involved. So I'm glad I remembered that I needed to end the presentation advising you of this opportunity. which is available to you. And I would thoroughly recommend that if you're interested, that you go and have a look. Now, sadly, if you look at these photographs of cybersecurity courses, you will still see a relatively small number of women. Sad, but true. It is generally the case. I would like to be showing these photographs in a few years' time and have equal numbers of men and women. But this just shows you exactly what's going on in cybersecurity for the present time. And so that's all our wonderful social media channels. Remember, though, always be aware of what could be happening to you when you're on any of these social media environments. Do look out on LinkedIn. There are some. If you get an unsolicited message on LinkedIn which is asking you to click on any link or provide any details, be very, very wary, because it is a known phenomenon of people going looking for information on platforms like LinkedIn. I don't want to make you paranoid. I just want to make you aware. So that's the end of the actual presentation. I know we've got time for chat and questions and anything you want to ask. I'm sure Eva will make sure that you get a chance to ask it. So thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Rhonda, for your wealth of information about security and cybersecurity. So you've given us a lot of information here, which I'm also just digesting. I would really like all participants to pose your questions, at least in the Q&A part of this. And while waiting for that, let me start by asking you, I have a few questions myself. I mean, in nuclear in general, the number of women is lower than that of men, and we know there are some certain reasons for it starting from a very young age. And I'm wondering, what are the three key reasons why there are just so few women in nuclear security compared to the nuclear field in general? Is there a particular reason for that?
Yes, it's really all to do with how incredibly male-dominated it is, and that has one main driving factor, and that is the idea that most of the nuclear security professionals ought to come from military or security or intelligence backgrounds. So we're inheriting a problem. We're inheriting a problem because those feeder backgrounds are overwhelmingly staffed by men. So that's where, in the first place, it comes from, because I first met cybersecurity professionals in the year 2001. Just about every single one I met was a man. Without exception, every single one had come from one of the services, Army, Navy, Air Force. And overwhelmingly, it was considered that that background was a necessary precondition to understanding nuclear security. That is a very, very hard stereotype to break. And even when women have the exact same profile, they are still treated as if they are not experts. There is a wonderful lady who is the president of Women in Nuclear Australia. She is a friend of mine. She is, or was, she's now retired, a lieutenant colonel in the Australian Army. She was the first woman to lead the engineering regiment of CBRNE response. Every step of the way, it was a battle. She went to the United States to do the specialized training in CBRNE. When she came back, she was not given a job in that area. whereas every single man who had preceded her on that elite training course in the United States walked into the job when they came back. She still had to fight for the job. At every step of the way, she has faced prejudice. One of the most hilarious stories, well, it's not really hilarious, but one of the things we often focus on in our discussions is the gendered assumption about who a nuclear security expert even leads to women being issued with male body armor. So most of us are normal size for women. You would never expect that you would have to fit into a piece of body armor that's made for a man who's probably 20 or 30 centimeters taller than you, 20 or 30 kilos larger than you, does not have breasts for a start, but you're expected to wear the same body armor. And this same woman, when she was a lieutenant colonel, was issued with body armor that when she sat down, the top of the body armor covered her face. And when she tried to fire her service weapon, she actually could not get her arm into a firing position around the body armor. Now, we joked about it, but in fact, that could have cost her her life in a combat zone. So not only are we dealing with the fact that there isn't an expectation that women are in the field, but when they are in the field, they are still not being catered for. So every time I do, any kind of presentation on this, even if it's not in the area of security, just think about the PPE that you need for radiation protection purposes. I once asked a group of women who work for Sellafield, as you know, the largest manager of radioactive waste and spent fuel probably in the world, and certainly the largest stocks of plutonium. I once said to them, have any of you ever worn PPE that was designed for your body? And this was on a virtual discussion, and they all looked at each other kind of on the computers, kind of looking across. And they basically said, no, we were always issued with small men's. And then we just wrapped it around a few times. And then I said, well, what about when you were pregnant? And they went, well, no one issued us anything. And my other great story is there's a woman who works for the Canadian operator Bruce Power. And she was one of the few women who was on the nuclear security response force. So she was on guard force. And she was the first nuclear response force officer to become pregnant. Funnily enough, none of the men had become pregnant. And so suddenly they had to deal with the fact that she was pregnant. So, of course, none of the regulations about guard force physical testing had ever taken pregnancy into account. Ever. So that was new. And then when she returned, none of the nuclear guard force testing had ever taken breastfeeding into account. So, I mean, so she was a pioneer, and now I'm very happy to say that Bruce Power has a number of women in their response force, and they actually have regulations that now deal with pregnancy, maternity leave, return to work. But these are all of the hurdles. So although one could say cybersecurity doesn't actually require PPE, cybersecurity requires sufficient young women coming through the engineering, mathematics, and science fields. My older sister, who is 68 and was the CEO of Engineers Australia, did electrical engineering in 1981 and was the only woman in her graduating class. And she still works with universities. And she said, depressingly, 40 years later, she is not seeing significantly more young women in engineering classes than when she finished university in 1981. So we've obviously got a big challenge ahead of us to normalize our profession for girls and young women. But I mean, that just inspires me. I think we shouldn't get depressed. I think we should actually get energized by the size of the challenge that we have, and use every opportunity. There's a wonderful young woman who is at MIT, and her name is Kaylee Cunningham, and she styles herself Miss Nuclear on TikTok. And she has a massive following. I know that TikTok is controversial in some countries, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but young women love TikTok, right? They love it. So why not? Let's just appreciate the fact that young women love TikTok. So she creates videos and puts them on TikTok, dispelling and debunking myths about nuclear. And she has upwards of 90,000 followers. And she has had young girls reach out to her through her videos and ask her how could they become a nuclear engineer, which, you know, has to be just as she said, it's the best part of her day, that she's actually, you know, making a difference. Okay, there's Amelia.
Yes, we have one question in the chat. So maybe you briefly want to read through it. We have Maria Emilia Sabatini, whom I met 10 days ago.
Yes. Now, herein lies the basic answer to the question, because when you think about nuclear safety and nuclear security, the fundamental issue is that the nuclear security systems exist in order to protect those key areas of the reactor that are fundamental to it operating safely. So, what is a vital area from a nuclear security point of view? A vital area from a nuclear security point of view is an area where the most important functions which allow the reactor to safely operate are located. So essentially, everything that's done in cybersecurity and in physical protection is to protect the integrity of the safe functioning of the reactor. So if we go back to the cybersecurity, hang on, I'm going to go back to the presentation. For me, the entire basis of, sorry to give you all a bit of a headache while I'm doing this, but for me, the entire basis of this is a safety basis. So cybersecurity in relation to an operational technology system, its fundamental purpose is to ensure that the human being who is reading the monitor is being given the accurate information about physical processes, about the water height, about the position of the valve. So for me, essentially, nuclear security and cybersecurity are to protect the functions of safety, the major safety systems, structures, and components. If we go, sorry about this, everybody, if we go to this slide. So essentially, whilst physical protection systems in and of themselves need to be protected from cyber attack, like you don't want someone interfering with your video surveillance system, you don't want someone interfering with your intrusion detection or your physical access control. The reason why all those things exist is to keep adversaries away from nuclear material. It's to keep adversaries from sabotaging the facility by interfering with those major safety functions and, for instance, causing a loss of coolant accident. So you need to protect the physical protection systems in and of themselves, but you essentially need cybersecurity to protect the nuclear safety-related systems in and of themselves and the emergency preparedness systems in and of themselves. So for me, Amelia, that is the fundamental safety security interface, which is nuclear security only exists to protect and preserve safety functions. It doesn't exist for its own sake. It exists essentially to deter an adversary who wishes to cause harm at the facility, to detect them and then assess, where they are and what they're doing, to delay them. And then in the final step, the delay is so that before they get to whatever their target is within the facility, the response force has interdicted them, has stopped them, has either denied access to whatever they wanted to get to, or contained them in such a way that all of the safety functions of the actual facility can work properly. So for me, that essentially is the reconciliation of safety and security. It's to say the security is all designed to ensure the safe operation of the facility. And of course, it's all risk-based and risk-informed, because whatever money you're spending on security, you're taking away from operations, arguably. So you always need to make sure that there is a good balance between the money that you spend and the risk reduction that you achieve. And that's why in a lot of countries, the regulatory system is performance-based rather than prescriptive, particularly in the area of cybersecurity, because it's saying to an operator, how do you achieve this level of performance? We're not going to tell you exactly how to do it, because our solution might be more expensive and it might not deliver the outcome that you need or that you want. Did that answer your question? Sorry, I kind of went around. But please let me know if it didn't.
Really, I don't know whether you can speak or you want to speak. Can you just type in? Okay.
Okay, cool.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks for that also, Rhonda. And I also see, it's not just safety related, but also safeguards related. The information, the safeguards information also needs to be protected. That's why I strongly believe in the 3S, that we all need to work together to ensure that all information is handled safely, securely, and safeguarded as well. I just want to mention, well, in my personal experience, I was kind of involved in one event that was not at a nuclear power plant, but at an enrichment facility. It was the Stuxnet virus, which was actually a worm.
Yeah. And
all the consequences that it had. And I think that this was one of the early events in our experience. I have one question about cybersecurity. What is the ideal background of somebody working in cybersecurity? Does that person need to have an IT background, or can people who don't have a IT background also work in cybersecurity? And how does that? What's the difference between?
Yeah, it's a pity we don't have Don Dudenhofer on here, because he is passionate about this topic and he's worked a lot with me on the question of how we get a more diverse workforce. There will be people with computer science backgrounds, but there'll also be people with electrical engineering backgrounds. But for me, it's about understanding a logical system. Now, there are different roles in cybersecurity. Now, one could say that in a cybersecurity staff, you might want to have someone who is specialized in understanding software or the kinds of protections that you might have. But you also need people who are capable of understanding the overall programmatic elements and also risk reduction. So I think it's very much a multidisciplinary team. I always find it interesting that engineers and physicists are always assumed to be inherently logical, and therefore they can go off and do many other things in the nuclear sector. But lawyers aren't considered to be the same. But in many respects, we all start working in other fields. I have a colleague who's a chemist who worked on development of MOX fuel. But simply because he has a science background, then he's assumed to be knowledgeable about everything to do with radiation protection and everything to do with nuclear safety. And then I'll say, but hang on a minute, he's a chemist who made MOX fuel in a production line. And just as he might be capable of doing these other things because they have a logical framework, well, so too do many other people with different disciplines. So I guess what I'd say is that cybersecurity is a field that's relatively open. There are lots of different aspects of it, but I would never pretend to anyone that I could apply for a job and understand all of the issues related to software patching, for instance. But the interesting thing is that there may be people in levels of an organization who need to be able to ask intelligent questions. And that's just as important because as the World Economic Forum report indicated, many people in leadership positions do not know how to ask informed questions about cybersecurity risk, but they will be the people who make decisions about how much money the organization is going to invest in risk reduction. So I guess the thing is, if you're interested in cybersecurity, then figure out which contribution you could make to the field of cybersecurity and what kind of role that might be, whether it's strategic, policy, risk reduction, whether it's actually someone with an engineering or computer science background, then that would be slightly different. But the one lesson I've learned in nuclear security and other aspects of security is never assume that a single qualification or education is the only thing that will be relevant, when we're dealing with these very complicated issues.
Yes, I
Don't rule yourself out is the basic idea.
Well, Aronda, I have one last question maybe. How do you see the future in terms of nuclear security, state actors versus non-state actors? Where's the direction going, and what role does, for example, artificial intelligence play in security?
Well, I'll be very honest with you and say I recently wrote a report, which you probably can't see because of the background, but I wrote a report called Nuclear Security 2.0, and it was all about the impact of the war in Ukraine and a state actor being engaged in behaviors that we generally ascribe to non-state actors. And what did that mean for nuclear security, given that all of the relevant international instruments related to nuclear security assume that the adversary is a criminal or a terrorist or a non-state group. So it just started to explore the question of what do you do, because the fundamental difference is capability. If you look at nuclear security threat actors, there is motivation, there is intention. So motivation, ideological, criminal, why are they doing it? Intention, to steal material, to sabotage a facility, to steal information. The one big differentiator is capability. What is the capability of that threat actor? Now, the minute you are talking about a state, the capability of that threat actor is off the scale compared to any other non-state actor. Even very well-financed non-state actors are not in the same ballpark. So we are actively looking at that. We're also looking at the circumstances where a state actor stands behind a non-state actor, so proxies. There is a rapid advancement of technology. So one of my colleagues, I didn't attend it, and I cannot swear that I am anything like an expert or even very aware of all the issues in artificial intelligence, but it is clearly with us now, upon us, and something that we have to rapidly understand. So I would encourage people to go to the WINS website. I think you might have to become a member. That's very simple, doesn't cost any money, and download our most recent report on AI and nuclear security and the applications of it. We've looked quite a bit at advanced technologies. One of the big issues, of course, and it's coming out of the conflict in Ukraine as well, is uncrewed vehicles, either uncrewed aerial vehicles, otherwise known as drones, and the manner in which they can be used for both defensive purposes and offensive purposes. So, you know, people using it to protect their facilities, or indeed adversaries using it for reconnaissance, surveillance, or indeed to deliver a payload of explosives. So we are in very frightening times, very difficult times, and there is a constant evolution in the capability of adversaries. And of course, state actors traditionally are not part of nuclear security. There is a whole basic concept that is governed by the rules of war. It's governed by things like the Geneva Convention and other instruments. It's not governed by nuclear security instruments, but I think it would be naive for us to think that we don't have to take it into account. And in fact, we will have a publication coming out soon where I have interviewed, amongst other people, Herman Halushenko, who's the Minister of Energy of Ukraine, Petro Kotin, who is the Director General of Energoatom, who runs all the nuclear power plants, Oleg Korokov, who is the regulator, and I have asked them all about what has changed in all of this now that a state actor is both an occupant of an operating, well, not operating anymore, of a power plant, and all of the implications that this has for our sector, both from the safeguards point of view, because as you know very well, the occupation of Crimea, the occupation of other territories fundamentally raised the question of who was responsible, of course, Russia being a nuclear weapons state and Ukraine not being one, and the differences there. So there are many, many questions that the international community has to grapple with, not least of all what's going on in Zaporizhzhia daily.
Yes, thank you, Rhonda. Unfortunately, I have to agree with you. It's really scary times we are living in, and I really hope that, how should I say it, that states come back to their senses and realize that we can only live together peacefully if we work together and don't fight each other. And I think this is one of the reasons why we have this initiative, because I think we need more women, because I cannot imagine
start wars.
that any mother or sister or grandmother would like to see their sons, grandsons to die in war. So anyway, I think we are coming to an end of this session, and I would like to say a big thank you to you, Rhonda, in the name of
pleasure.
You're an excellent nuclear security lawyer. So I think you are an example that it doesn't really matter what background you have, as long as you are passionate and knowledgeable about what you are doing. So thank you very much for making us interested. And for all of those who are listening, I encourage you to check out the WINS website and to become a member. Actually, I myself joined the WINS last week. It's very simple, it's free of charge, and you have access to a huge database and of information that is relevant for the field. So Rhonda, thank you so much. Dear participants, thank you very much. And I wish you a nice rest of the day, and a big thank you from all of us to you, Rhonda.
Thank you very much, and I'm at your disposal whenever you need me.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. All the best.
Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.